Hello and welcome, I'm Tafarra Gadamu. The political discourse in this country, with elites at the helm, seems to be helpful, yet disquieting too. What is really happening and where are we headed? My guest today, Ibrahim Mulushewa, is a historian and a political analyst. A very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We live in this country now in interesting times. Interesting, not necessarily in the positive sense, but in the sense that these are, I guess, troubling times for the country. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. On the one hand, it's true that we are in trouble because, liberalization, political liberalization, that means came with, a very polarized, I can't say society, but elites coming with different ideas, opposing and contrasting ideas and nationalisms. Therefore, that is creating a problem in the present Ethiopia. But on the other hand, I can say we are also living in a country where democracy is, being exercised in a relative term. That means comparing it with the past. Therefore, yes, we are in trouble, but we are not hopeless, I think. A lot of bright future is there on our way, but it cannot be denied that we are in trouble.
Interesting. I see many workshops and conferences being organized by X number of institutions, yes, including academic ones.
Yes.
And when I say we live in interesting times, but and also in troubling times, what I'm trying to allude to is this. I mean, the level of civility in the discourse that we are organizing leaves much to be desired.
Yes, but it's also related to our experience as an open society. We are not open for almost a century after the establishment of modern Ethiopia. We went through feudal system, and then the Derg came with the dent of power, as it was in the past. And also EPRDF's 27 years cannot be evaluated as a democratic period. And then it is only, I think, 1 year ago that we started to exercise our liberty.
But there are divergent views, right? As far as the 27 years you just mentioned, the last 1 year that we are living in too, right? I mean, it's not necessarily a linear kind of
yes, but
understanding that
one thing constant is we were ruled by dictators and totalitarian regimes were there in Ethiopia. And coming out of this situation is a very difficult task to do. Therefore, I cannot undermine the way politics was run in this country for a century, and it cannot be defeated within a year. Therefore, on the one hand, it's natural that when a closed door, as the Prime Minister said, that opened, every dirty thing come out of it. Therefore, one important point is that. The other important point is that also the culture of our politics. We were fighting each other for almost even beginning from the 1940s student movements. For example, almost every opposition in Ethiopia was the left. But among the left groups, no one was ready to talk than to fight. Therefore, this culture of fighting is, I think, in one hand continuing, and it is not giving a way for civility, as you termed it. We have a culture of discussion, discourses, and accommodating opposition views. Therefore, on the one hand, as a history student, I want to relate everything with our history, our culture, political culture especially. Therefore, it's not a surprising, but it's unfortunate that we are still in a troubling time.
Interesting that you mentioned the 1960s and also the very early 1970s. I'm sure you're talking about the Ethiopian student movement. I mean, it involved a number of young Ethiopians who were basically selfless and paid dearly for their actions. They were not. I beg to differ here because folks from the 1960s are not necessarily violent. They were the people who made the present-day Ethiopia possible.
Yes, but the question is what kind of Ethiopia was created by them is very important.
But we're talking about...
And also, I don't undermine the new generation. Even for the last 6-7 years, sacrifice was paid by young generation, and the young generation is also innocent and also genuine. Therefore, I am not judging people because of their generational difference. But what I am talking about is, as you said, Ethiopia, a new Ethiopia, revolutionary Ethiopia, beginning from 1974, was shaped by these elites who were young in the 1960s. Therefore, my evaluation is whether these movements or leaders were democratic enough to sit down and talk rather than fighting each other.
By exchange, by your argument, are we not seeing people, elites in this country, who are intolerant to each other as we speak?
In one hand, yes, I can't generalize, and I can't say everyone is a kind of intolerant, but. And also, we have to look at the evolution, how that evolution was to create differences in ethnic identity, not ethnic identity. For that matter, ethnic identity has been with us, and diversity was there. But the important thing is this. The way politics was run, the way our experience to discuss things, especially when they are in opposing direction, is not, something we are proud of in this kind of history. Therefore, a new generation is also learned from the past generation, which created modern Ethiopia in a sense, especially post 1974 revolution. You know how many people were killed by Red Terror and the counter White Terror. And we know how Mengistu regime was ruthless. We know also how systematically Ethiopians were killed and tortured, and also how opposition was almost eliminated by EPRDF itself, especially for the last 27 years. Therefore, our historical record is not good in this respect. Therefore, after passing all these problems, all these troubles, I can't expect a country to be, very democratic and people's mind is free and accommodating. Therefore, I can expect this kind of problem. But I'm not saying also we can't do better things than we are now doing.
But this country has been in turmoil for as long as we can remember. Probably the peaceful times are far fewer. The years of peaceful times are far fewer than the ones where we find ourselves in constant conflict and so on. That seems to continue to this very day. And there are very people who sit down on the other side, of your argument and provide with a counter-argument. The killings have continued to this day.
Of course. That is what I'm saying. That is the legacy we are inherited from the past. That is what I am saying. But still, I'm optimist because Ethiopia is a big country. It cannot be dismantled because Ethiopia has never been. Ethiopians are fighting each other. I know that. But Ethiopians are also, at the end of the day, Ethiopians and want this country to continue. What kind of Ethiopia? We are always disputing.
Exactly. I'll come to that. But you seem in one of the presentations that I've attended, of course, yours, very recently, about 2 weeks ago. You seem to argue that diversity is not necessarily a virtue.
Yes, it's not a virtue.
Why?
Because diversity, we are a creation of our families, our thoughts, our religion, and our background as this or that ethnic groups. This should be recognized. It's not bad, but the difference created among elites is also related to their background. Therefore, if we are not taking this as a challenge and try to tackle it, we are always, mystifying ethnicity or religion as only religious difference or ethnic difference as only positive thing. It's not. For example, a simple example, a family with 2 children and a family with 12 children are not the same, because 12 means more interest.
Yeah, I know, but if you're talking about this dynamics that tends to evolve in any given country, look at our neighbors, Somalia. It tends to be quite a homogeneous society. That what you just said does not necessarily translate.
Yes, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying that lack of diversity is a guarantee for peace. I'm not saying that. But I'm talking about diversity as a virtue, or is diversity a virtue, or yes, a virtue, I believe. But it's not only a virtue, it's also a challenge.
It becomes a challenge when?
When different ideas came and when people are identifying themselves as only, for example, as this ethnic group. A country with diversity is more difficult than a country with some kind of homogeneity, because always there are interests emanate from our identity. As an Amhara, I have, for example, this different ethnic movements are arguing that this is my interest was hurt, and my interest was not served. I am oppressed by the government because I'm from this or that ethnicity. For example, as a Muslim, believe that Ethiopia was not treating Muslims like it treated Christians. Therefore diversity, because especially when a leader is conceived to be from the other, the other is important. Therefore, we have to, I'm not saying that diversity is bad, but diversity should be understood from different direction. That was my message.
Okay. So what are the key challenges this country is facing, you think?
One is how to accommodate different interests and aspiration of different groups.
And who is to blame?
No one. If a blame is there, my blame would be on governments, on the system, which we created in the past. But I'm not also blaming only leaders. For example, Emperor Melilik was, on the one hand, he is my favorite leader, because Melilik, created this country anew. And it was because of Melilik that I'm Ethiopian. But also I can understand why people hated Melilik. Because, modern state was established after a fight, after a war against one state against the other. State means the different states. Ethiopia was not only a country of diversity in terms of ethnicity, but Ethiopia was historically a country of diversity in terms of states. There were different states. Therefore, the Shoan states defeated others. And I can understand the mentality of a defeated group or person who identified himself from this or that. For example, Amir Abdullahi was defeated at the Battle of Jalanko. And I can understand how the Harari felt that. I can understand how the Oromos felt that. Therefore, on the one hand, I can say why people love Minilik and how people hate Minilik. Therefore, mystifying Minilik or just hating Minilik for the sake of hate is not necessary.
What other challenges do you see?
The other challenge is our political culture, especially our elites culture. I'm not blaming the people in the 90s, but unfortunately, what we have seen as a positive step by Dr. Abiy, who came into power a year ago, I think partly he was also from the latter generation who can understand the new changes in the country, because he's in the 40s. I think he's a little bit aloof from the past, and he can see also the new generation, the aspiration of the new generation, the need for democratization rather than ideology. For example, the 1960s, it was necessary to be ideologically driven because socialism was there, and it was.
But you need to have a sense of direction, whether you call it ideology or something else.
Yeah, of course.
And that's very important.
That is very important, but at the same time, it was also challenging because ideologies always, like religion, ideologies are always talking about absolutism. You know, my idea is right, but others are wrong. This kind of mentality is, I think, emanates from our ideological stance, I think.
But are elites accommodative enough these days?
The important thing is who are elites. Still, I believe that the bulk of elites we are against or in favor are from the 1960s. Still, that generation is not giving a way for the new generation. Still, we are fighting, standing with this or that ideologies. For example, ethnicity. I cannot say ethnic diversity, but ethnic-based movements were also created in the 90s, 60s with the students' movement. Still, what we are talking about is created in that very historical moment. Therefore, we are continuing the same discussion for centuries about ethnicity, about diversity, but we are not solving it. We talked a lot.
And why do you think the younger generation of elites, Ethiopians, are not making a market departure from what's here?
The younger generation, you know, this country, especially the impact of Red Terror was very important, because that generation in the 1970s was, as you said, was energetic, but it was totally eliminated with the Red Terror. And Ethiopians were silenced for almost decades beginning from Red Terror. And the governments were successful in silencing the new generation, and a new revolution was not happening. What happened in the 1990s with the coming of EPRDF was a change by the same generation. You know, Prime Minister Meles and his colleagues were also from that generation. Therefore, change agents were the same generation. But I think with the coming of this new movement, starting from 10 years ago, a new movement, whether you call it Kero or you call it Fanno, these are movements run by a new generation, but with less experience. Still, their figures are the 1970s figures. Still, you know, the people like Obolenjo, the people like Professor Musfin and others are very important in this country. In in directing our thoughts or something. Therefore, a new generation, I think, with a new liberalization of politics will, I think, play a greater role in the future. But until that was matured, I think it takes time.
So we have a federal arrangement in this country which has been in place for whatever 20 years, right? And it's not going to go away, you think? Is there any going back?
No, I don't think so. That is what I fear. Because we had a system in which it was in place for the last 27 years, but we are not agreeing with the new arrangement. The problem is this. Okay, who is in favor of federalism and who is against it? Even you remember in that same conference I and you participated. You remember how Atoledetu was arguing. He's saying, I'm not against federalism.
He doesn't know of anyone who is in favor of federalism.
Therefore, on the one hand, everybody is saying that. But not everybody, but those who said that the problem with this constitution, federalism, federalist arrangement. But on the one hand, they say this is the only way for us to continue as a country. In principle, everybody's saying now, especially for big.
And what do you think about that?
I think federalism is unavoidable for me. And people are now saying, what kind of federalism? What we are arguing is whether ethnic federalism is good or bad. And now I think there is no anymore argument about federalism is necessary or not. There is no political party. I can't say there is no, but at least in the discourse we do not see any unitary favoring arguments. Therefore, federalism is, I think, accepted by everyone, but the arrangement, the federal arrangement, what kind of federal arrangement should be in place is a contentious issue.
Are you talking about geographical things?
Yes, geographical, but those who argue against ethnic federalism, I think they are not, at least for the moment, they are not articulating what does this geographical arrangement is. And also, I think in this argument also we lack one important thing. Federalism may have been imposed on people, I believe also.
Do you think?
Yes, it was imposed by EPRDF. One important point is this. But on the other hand, this system created its own generation who favor it.
But it's interesting.
For example,
it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you say the ethnic identities, the ethnicity has always been in the Ethiopian psyche. I mean, it could go further than that down in history, but you mentioned the 1960s, the Ethiopian student movement, where it was very well articulated. So when it comes to the 1990s, how can you say it's imposed? Because it has been evolving over the years.
Ethnicity as identity was there, but ethnicity as a political power and a state structure was imposed. The two are different. Well, Afars were there, but there was no Afar regional state.
But one leads to the other when you talk about solutions to problems that appear along the way.
Of course, but EPRDF...
So wasn't federalism of ethnic variety the natural conclusion to a problem
It was not natural, but it can be learned and it can be accepted later. Even the creation of Ethiopia was not natural. It was imposed. Immediately imposed on different ethnic groups, Ethiopianism. A thing which was imposed is not necessarily bad. A thing which was, it is neutral, but people learn to live it. Therefore, what I was saying is, the system in Ethiopia in the post-1990s was imposed. And in this respect, people like Ledatu are correct. But on the other hand, to say that now in Ethiopia, ethnic federalism has no followers is false for me. Because ethnic federalism has created its own supporters. For example, I'm always in discussion with the Afars, the Somali, these minorities. Ethnic federalism is accepted by them. The Oromos wanted ethnic federalism. The Tigrayans, I'm not saying the people. Of course, it is difficult to distinguish between the elites and because the elites influencing the people. But to dismiss ethnic federalism as something which is not accepted by Ethiopians is not true.
Well, Ibrahim, thank you very much indeed. It was a pleasure having you on my show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.